Good evening. On behalf of the Center for Japanese Studies, I would like to welcome you all to the award ceremony of the 6th Berkeley Japan Prize. My name is Junko Habu, and I am the chair of the Center for Japanese Studies, or CJS, at UC Berkeley. First, I would like to thank the Department of Music and the Institute of East Asian Studies for co-sponsoring this important ceremony. The recipient of the 2023 Berkeley Japan Prize is internationally acclaimed composer Toshio Hosokawa. Toshio Hosokawa was born in Hiroshima in 1955. After beginning his musical training in Tokyo, he went to Berlin to study with the Korean master composer Lee Sang-yoon, and then with Klaus Huber. Studying music in Europe made him realize that he was Japanese. The realization that eventually became the core component of his music creation. The sound of traditional Japanese instruments, such as shakuhachi, tsuzumi, and koto, the no play, and the art of calligraphy, as well as the Japanese landscapes and the history of people on the Japanese archipelago, are all part of his music. Earlier this month, I was actually in Shikoku, on the other side of the Seto Inland Sea, looking at the landscapes. The mild climate, the sunshine, the waves, all reminded me of his music. In Voiceless Voice in Hiroshima, he expressed the devastation and trauma incurred upon Hiroshima city by the atom bomb. His recent opera, Silent Sea, is about a mother who lost her son in the 2011 Tohoku earthquake, and it incorporates elements of the Japanese no play Sumidagawa with contemporary opera sounds. Toshio Hosokawa updated No mastered the affordances of contemporary Western music, foregrounded stories of contemporary Japan, and used the sounds of Japanese traditional music. His accomplishment shows potential for the deep understanding of aesthetics and philosophies that transcends cultural boundaries. And all of us who study here in North America from other countries, and those of us who were born in this country and studying other cultures, we all face with this kind of barriers, and we try to find a way to get through the barriers. And talking to Toshio Hosokawa, I've learned a lot, and I continue to learn from his music about the potential of us to transcend the cultural boundaries and understand each other. The CJS Berkeley Japan Prize is a Lifetime Achievement Award from our center, given to an individual who has made significant contributions to enriching the understanding of Japan on the global stage. And we believe that Hosokawa's work is a perfect match for this award. Today, after receiving the award certificate, we will ask Hosokawa-san to give his acceptance speech. He wishes to give his speech in his native language, Japanese, and it will be translated into English by a professional interpreter and a friend of CJS, Beth Carey. After the acceptance speech, renowned master koto player and multi-instrumentalist Kyoko Kawamura will play Hosokawa's Koto-Uta. This will be followed by a conversation with Ken Ueno, professor of the music department. Ken will also moderate the Q&A session with the audience towards the end of today's event. Everyone, it is now my privilege to introduce Toshio Hosokawa. Hosokawa-san, please. University of California, Berkeley, Center for Japanese Studies hereby presents the Berkeley Japan Prize 2023 to Mr. Toshio Hosokawa for outstanding accomplishments as a composer, imbuing contemporary Western music with Japanese aesthetics, and thereby broadening the field. Friday, January 20th, 2023, Junko Habu, Chair, Center for Japanese Studies, and Carol T. Christ, Chancellor, University of California, Berkeley. Now we will ask him to give his acceptance speech.
この度はバークレー日本賞のような偉大な賞をいただき、カリフォルニア大学バークレー校、そして日本研究センターの皆さんに心から感謝いたします。特にバークレー校に私を推薦してくださった優れた作曲家でパフォーマーであるケン・上野さんに深く感謝いたします。
I would like to express my deep appreciation to University of California, Berkeley, and to all of you at the Center for Japanese Studies for awarding me this distinguished Berkeley Japan Prize. In particular, I am thankful to the outstanding composer and performer, Ken Ueno, for recommending me to UC Berkeley.
私がバークレーという名前を聞いたときにすぐに思い浮かべたのは、私が心から尊敬する世界的な指揮者、ケント・長野さんのことでした。彼はここバークレーで生まれ、勉強され、そして今はヨーロッパ、北米を中心に世界的な活躍を続けています。私は幸運にも彼に何度も自作を素晴らしく演奏いただく機会を得ました。その中には、ケントさんから依頼で作曲した私の重要な作品であるオペラ、海静かな海、シティレス・メイヤやバイオリン協奏曲、ゲネシスもあります。私は今回初めてバークレーに参りましたが、ケントさんの生まれ故郷をぜひ体験してみたいと願っています。
When I heard the name Berkeley, what came first to my mind was Kent Nagano, the world-acclaimed conductor whom I deeply esteem. Born in Berkeley, he studied in the Bay Area and continues to be active around the world, especially in Europe and North America. I am fortunate to have been given the opportunity to have my compositions performed by him on many occasions. Among them are the opera commissioned by Kent, Silent Sea, a major work of mine, and the violin concerto, Genesis. This is the first time I have been to Berkeley, and I am eager to become familiar with Kent's hometown.
私は1955年に広島市の郊外にある瀬戸内海沿いの小さな町に生まれました。原爆投下の10年の後ですが、私の生まれた町には原爆の被害はなく、静かな海とたくさんの島のある 瀬戸内海沿いの小高い山と川に恵まれた美しい町でした。子供の頃からピアノを習い始め、私は西洋音楽の基礎勉強を早くから始めました。しかし私の家はとても日本的な家でした。祖父が生け花の師匠をし、母は琴をとても上手に演奏しました。しかし私は子供時代、そういう日本的なものが大嫌いでした。それはとても古めかしく、格式ばって生き生きとしたものを感じることができませんでした。
I was born in 1955 in the outskirts of Hiroshima City in a small town on the Seto Inland Sea. It was 10 years after the atom bomb was dropped, but the town where I was born suffered no damage from the bomb. It was a beautiful town blessed with hills and rivers along the inland sea coast, with its calm sea and many islands. I learned piano in my childhood and studied the basics of Western music from early on. But my family was very traditionally Japanese. My grandfather was an ikebana flower arrangement master, and my mother was very gifted in playing the koto. In my childhood, I hated those types of Japanese traditions. To me, they were outmoded, bound in formality, so I couldn't feel anything vivid in them.
私が子供の頃好きだった音楽は、モーツァルトやベートーベンの名曲やアメリカのバーンスタインのミュージカル音楽でした。1960年代の終わり頃、世界的な指揮者、小沢誠二さんに憧れ、彼のレコードを集めて繰り返し聴いていました。その当時、小沢誠二さんは、トロント交響楽団からサンフランシスコ交響楽団の音楽監督になられて、国際的なキャリアを始められていました。
The types of music I liked as a child were the classical works of Mozart, Beethoven, and others, and American musicals by Bernstein. Toward the late 1960s, I came to admire the world-renowned conductor Seiji Ozawa, collecting his records and listening to them over and over. That was when Seiji Ozawa was starting his international career at the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, then as music director of the San Francisco Symphony.
私の家の裏には小さな山があり、そこにはいくつかの神秘的な竹林がありました。その竹林は私の秘密の場所で、私はそこにカセットレコーダーに録音したクラシック音楽を持っていき、思いっきり大音量で流し、お箸をタクトにして指揮者になったつもりで一人だけで指揮をしていたのです。
There was a small hill behind my house with several mystical bamboo groves. These bamboo groves were my secret place where I would take a cassette recorder with the tapes of classical music and play them at full volume. I would use a chopstick as my baton and conduct the music as if I were the orchestra conductor.
そんな中に小沢誠二さんが録音した竹光徹さんのノベンバーステップスという日本の伝統楽器尺八と琵琶とオーケストラのための作品がありました。その音楽はとても不思議で、西洋のベートーベンのようなはっきりとしたリズムもなく、指揮はうまくできないのです。しかしその音楽は林の中に風に揺れる竹の葉や木漏れ日の動きに寄り添い、まるでその竹林全体から生まれてくるように聞こえてくるのです。私はその不思議な響きに魅惑され、いつかこのような不思議な神秘的な音楽が書きたい、このような響きを生み出せる作曲家になりたいと強く願うようになりました。
Among the works I listened to was Seiji Ozawa's recording of Toru Takemitsu's November Steps that he composed for the Japanese traditional instruments shakuhachi and biwa and orchestra. That music was very unusual, without a distinct rhythm as in Western music by Beethoven, making it hard to conduct. Yet, that music sounded as if it was born out of the entire bamboo grove, drawing close to the bamboo leaves swaying in the breeze through the grove in the dappled sunlight. I was entranced by the strange resonance and harbored a deep wish to someday write such mysterious and strange music as this and become a composer who could bring forth such resonance.
そして私は15歳の時から故郷広島を離れ、東京に音楽の勉強に出かけ、さらに20歳の時から ドイツのベルリンに留学して、そこで本格的に作曲の勉強をするようになりました。そのベルリンの私の師匠は、東洋人で最初に西洋音楽の世界で認められた韓国人の作曲家イ・サン・ユンでした。彼は彼の祖国の伝統音楽を新しい20世紀の音楽語法で生き生きとよみがえらせたのです。1960年代、西洋音楽は西洋中心主義から離れて、世界の民族音楽や非西洋圏の音楽にも深い関心を示すようになっていました。竹光徹やイ・サン・ユンは、そうした時代背景の中で最初に説得力のある音楽を生み出すことができ、西洋に認められた作曲家でした。
With this in mind, I left my hometown in Hiroshima at age 15 to study music in Tokyo, and at age 20 went abroad to Berlin to start my study of composition in earnest. My mentor in Berlin was the Korean composer Isak Yun, who was the first East Asian composer to be recognized in Western music circles. Using new 20th century musical language, he vividly revived the traditional music of his country. In the 1960s, Western music was departing from Western centrism to show deep interest in non-Western music, such as world music and tribal folk music. During this period, Toru Takemitsu and Isak Yun were the composers who were able to create the first persuasive music to be recognized by the West.
また私が留学したベルリンでは、現代の音楽と世界の民族音楽を同じコンサートで演奏する音楽祭がありました。私はその音楽祭で初めてアフリカやアジアの非ヨーロッパ圏の音楽を体験しました。その中に日本の仏教音楽の声明、宮廷音楽である雅楽、尺八、能の音楽とを初めて音楽として聴くことができました。それまで私はそうした音楽を日本での儀式に結びついた音楽、結婚式やお葬式の伴奏音楽として聴き、独立した音楽としては聴いていなかったのです。
In Berlin, where I was studying, there was a music festival with performances of modern music and world folk music at the same concerts. At this festival, I experienced for the first time African and Asian music, music that was not in the European sphere. There, I first heard as music the Japanese Buddhist music shomyo, imperial court music gagaku, shakuhachi, no music, and others. Until then, I had heard this music only as accompaniment to Japanese rites, played at weddings or funerals. I had never listened to it as independent music.
そしてその中には、私の母が家で演奏していた琴の音楽もあったのです。そして私は初めてその音楽が美しいと思うようになりました。そのように感じられるようになったのは、私の音楽の聴き方が20世紀以降の西洋音楽を聴くようになり、より繊細に緻密に音を聴くことができるようになったからです。さらに私は初めてヨーロッパでの生活で日本への強い郷愁があったからかもしれません。
Among those performances was music for koto that my mother used to play at our house. For the first time, I thought of this music as being beautiful. I was able to feel this way because as I listened to Western music since the 20th century, my way of listening to sound had become more delicate and accurate. It may also have been because I was feeling a strong sense of nostalgia toward Japan as I was living abroad in Europe for the first time.
さらにヨーロッパでの長い生活を始めて、私は自分が日本人であることを強く意識するようになりました。日本にいた時は私はほとんど外国人との接触を持ちませんでした。私はベルリンで初めて自分が日本人であり、世界の中での自分の立っている場所を見つめることができたのです。私は自分の音楽の根源はどこにあるのか、それを知るために日本の音楽や伝統芸術の勉強を本格的に始めました。それと同時に西洋音楽の最先端の人たちの音楽とも深く関わっていくようになりました。日本の音楽と西洋の音楽を両方深く学び、そのような立場から 自分の音楽を生み出していきたいと願いました。
While I spent a long time living in Europe, I began to have a strong sense that I was Japanese. When I was in Japan, I had hardly any contact with foreigners. While in Berlin, I was able to realize that I was Japanese and looked at the place where I stood in the world. Where was the root of my own music? In order to find that out, I began a serious study of Japanese music and traditional arts. At the same time, I became more involved in the music of those at the forefront of Western music. I wished to study deeply both Japanese and Western music and create my own music from that standpoint.
そうした私の音楽創造の原点になった出来事があります。私は20代の終わりの頃、日本へ一時帰国した時に、日本の文化を知るために、さまざまな分野の知識人や文化人と関わりを持ちました。その中に禅の実践をする仏教学者に出会いました。彼は毎日自分の訓練としてカリグラフィー、書を描いていました。彼は私の目前で大きな白い紙の上に大きな毛筆で道という字を書いてくれました。その際に彼はこのように説明してくれました。
There was one event that was the origin point for my music creation. Returning temporarily to Japan at the end of my 20s, I engaged with knowledgeable people in various cultural fields in my effort to learn about Japanese culture. Among them, I met a Buddhist scholar who was a Zen practitioner. As part of his training, he wrote a piece of calligraphy each day. As I watched, he wrote the character for the way with a large brush on a large sheet of white paper, and he explained his process to me in this way.
書はいきなり紙に書くのではなくて、空中の一点を定めて、その地点から線運動を出発させ、紙の上を通り抜けて再びその一点に帰ってくる運動である。紙の上に残された目に見える線は線運動の一部分に過ぎない。見える線は見えない世界を暗示している。
So he said, calligraphy isn't something you write all of a sudden. You determine a point in the air and start the linear motion from that point. Have it go through the surface of the paper and return the movement to that initial point. The visible lines that are left on the paper are just one segment of the linear movement. The visible lines also suggest the invisible world.
その時私は能楽の打楽器、鼓のことを考えていました。打楽器奏者が前方に手を広げて強い緊張感を持って前方に手を伸ばし、その地点から一気に鼓に向けて手を打ち込みます。その際の手を伸ばした空白の部分に緊張感がなければ音は生きたものになりません。
As I listened to him, I was thinking about the tsuzumi, the hand drum in no music. The percussionist opens his hand in front of him, stretches his hand with a strong sense of tension, and from that point hits the tsuzumi in one motion. If there's no sense of tension in the blank section when he stretches his hand, the sound does not fill with life.
この空白の緊張感は音そのものの持っている深さに測り合っているのです。聞こえてくる一つの音は聞こえない世界をも暗示している。白い余白の部分、沈黙の部分は音と同じように大切なものです。竹光徹はこのことを音、沈黙と測り合えるほどにという言葉で表現しています。それはよく言われる日本文化の間の大切さなのです。
This tension in the blank space is measured by the depth of the sound itself. The sound that is audible also suggests the world that is inaudible. The white empty space, the silent part, is as valuable as the sound. Toru Takemitsu expressed this with the words sound to the extent it can confront silence. This is the value of ma, or space or interval, that is often spoken about in Japanese culture.
今日は琴奏者の川村京子さんに私のKoto-Utaという作品を演奏していただきますが、そこでは一音一音は大きな間を空けて演奏されます。その音がない部分も音の一部分として聴いていただきたいのです。その余白の部分があるからこそ琴の一音が生きるのです。そして音は沈黙から生まれ、再び沈黙に帰っていきます。
Today, Ms. Kyoko Kawamura will perform my work Koto-Uta on the koto. This is performed with large intervals, or ma, between each sound. I would like you to listen to the parts with no sound as a part of the sound. It is because of this empty space that each sound of the koto comes alive, and the sound is born from silence and returns once again to silence.
音は生まれては消えていきます。西洋音楽は音たちの構築、音楽建築の中で永遠性を持ったカテドラルを生み出そうとしているのかもしれません。バッハやブルックナーの素晴らしい音楽を聴いていると、そのような音の大きなカテドラルを想像します。しかし私の音楽では、音は無常なもの、消えていくものとして捉えられています。ものの哀れという言葉がありますが、私は音楽も消えていくからこそ美しいと思うのです。
Sounds are born and then fade away. It may be that Western music is attempting to create a cathedral that contains immortality within the structure and architecture of music. I imagine such a large cathedral of sound when I listen to the glorious music of Bach or Bruckner. But in my music, sound is captured as something that is transient, is ephemeral, and will fade away. In Japanese, we have the aesthetic term mono no aware, or the pathos of things. I believe it is because music fades away that it is beautiful.
私たち日本人は桜を愛しています。桜は開花された瞬間も美しいのですが、それが散っていくとき、雪のように花びらが舞い散っていくときにさらに美しいと感じるのではないでしょうか。そして私たちの命も短く散っていくからこそ尊いのかもしれません。
We Japanese love cherry blossoms. They are lovely when they start blooming, but when the petals scatter, when they dance as if it is snowing, don't we feel that they are even more beautiful? And it may be because our lives are short and scatter that they are so sublime.
今回のバークレー日本賞をいただいたことを励みに、私はさらに深く日本の伝統の深みを探索し、世界に向かって美しい音楽を生み出していきたいと願っています。
With the encouragement that I have gained from receiving the Berkeley Japan Prize, I hope to further explore the depth of Japanese traditional culture in order to create beautiful music for the world.
ご清聴ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much for your kind attention.
それでは川村京子さんに演奏していただきます。
So Ms. Kawamura will now play the piece, Koto-Uta.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you to Kyoko-san for a wonderful performance and outdressing the rest of us. The beautiful kimono that she says is a normal kimono for her, but especially commissioned and in the back of the obi, right? We didn't get to, not even. 見せてくれ。Yeah, 後ろの帯の後ろ. Right. It has the gods of thunder and lightning, patterned from a painting in Kyoto. Yes. Yes. See, specifically for tonight's performance. She often commissions kimonos as an element of text setting for the repertoire. Right? It's a very special night for me tonight to be able to honor one of my biggest heroes in composition, and being at Berkeley for about 15 years, wanting to happen, to make this evening happen for as many years as I've been here. As a composer, mainly trained in the East Coast at conservatories and music departments, most of my training had involved learning about German composers, right? And it's been so important for me in my life to meet a living, breathing composer who was not German and looked a little bit more like me, right? And not only that, but he is an eminent composer, respected by Germans, and regularly commissioned by the world's greatest orchestra, the Berlin Phil. In fact, it was quite challenging to try to find a schedule to be able to bring him here because he's composing around the world all the time. Most recently, he finished a new violin concerto for the Berlin Philharmonic just this past December, to be premiered in March, as I understand. Yes. And this night is also part of a 2-week residency. Hosokawa Sensei is very generous in being able to spend time with us in the music department as well, and very generous with a very packed schedule of master classes and lectures. Next Friday, he will also present another lecture on the auspices of what we have at the music department, the block lecture. And that will be in the music department at 3 p.m. If you're on the mailing list here with the CJS, we'll forward it to you. So please also come for that. Oh, should I give? Would you? Oh, do I? Okay, just gonna look. So to be able to partner with events at the music department, and also want to thank the Institute of East Asian Studies and everyone at CJS to make all of this happen. So thank you. Thank you. Okay, and thank you all for being here. And my first question, I guess, is to follow up on a major topic about ma in your music. And you said how important it was in terms of calligraphy and Japanese aesthetics, and especially in the piece that we heard, especially at the beginning of the piece, and also how Kyoko-san interpreted, performed those spaces. I think it's very palpable how you compose the ma into music. But first, I wondered if you could unpack the importance of ma a little bit more personally, to advocate for what is it a kind of feeling, or how might you express your attachment to ma?
ですね。
してほしいっていうこと
いえいえ
いや考えてらっしゃる。
今間を考えるときはいつも非常にフリーに自分のこう直感で間を作っています。
The way I compose using ma is that I use it very freely, and it's basically my intuition that puts the spaces, the ma, into my music.
しかし作曲を始めた最初の頃はドイツで勉強した頃はかなり正確にヨーロッパの作曲家のように例えばフィボナッチの例とかね、そういう黄金分割とかを使って大体この辺りに音を入れよう、間を入れようというようなことを考えている。かなり論理的に作っていました。
But when I first started composing, and that was when I was in Germany and studying composition, I had to do it very logically and decide what section I would put a silence or a ma into my composition.
その時にそのフィボナッチの列とかね、それからフィボナッチってなんていうの、黄金分割、ゴールデンシュート。
Proportions or the Fibonacci proportions or sequence.
Sequence, okay. はい。
でそういうのを使ってたんですけども、だんだんそういうものが離れて自由にやった方がより生き生きとした間が作れることが分かりました。
So I was very conscious of putting the ma or the space into certain sequences. But then I realized that I should step away from that and become more free in the way I used the ma.
That's a interesting self-observation, I think, because I've also asked Hosokawa Sensei about his compositional process, and some composers are famous for being geeks and planning rhythms and harmonies and things like that. And then his answer was like, "Oh, I'm not a European composer," right? So, but I do know that some of his earlier pieces, some of the things on the score and what you said, your planning aspect, more Western planning scalpel, was more rigorous.
Yeah.
And then so I guess it's also a story of accumulating more confidence through experience to write, quote unquote, more intuitively. Would you agree with that?
そうです。だから例えばそのカリグラフィーを書くときでも、最初の頃はやっぱりかなり計算してどこに絵を描いてその間を作るか余白を作るかと考えると思うんですけども、だんだんそういうものから自由になって直感でこの辺りに何かがある、この辺りは空白にする、この辺りはたくさんの線を描くというようなことを直感的にだんだん分かってくるんじゃないかと思うんですね。だからそっちの自分の直感の方をだんだん大切にするようにしました。
So initially, I would calculate exactly where I would put the notes and where I would put the spaces. And it was a very set method that I used. But gradually, I realized that I could use my intuition to do this and to just leave it up to my feeling as to where I could put it in. And that has been my more recent method of composing.
I like that metaphor of learning to write calligraphy too, because there's initially like a grid, right? When you're learning to write, and then eventually you get rid of the grid, and then if you're a calligraphy master, it's even more a virtuosic, multi-vectored engagement with space, right? And also, as you said, a personal practice that is not, shall we say, I'm trying to formulate my question. I also tend to think one of the things that you said was that in calligraphy, what's important is not just what's left on marked on the page, but the full gesture that you don't see on the page. And I am thinking how that is a kind of counter proposition to neoliberalism, where the output of the thing that's on the page as a score or published or, kind of material productness of it's foregrounded. And if it's the counter proposition of a Zen master practicing calligraphy is a personal practice, and also learning to practice the full movements that's not even left on the page, speaks volumes of a greater cultural counterpoint, something like that.
I'm sorry, cultural what? The last word?
Counterpoint.
Counterpoint. Okay. 西洋の方ではよく物質的に何か成果を上げるページの上に譜面を書く、そういうふうなことがありますけれど、その今おっしゃった先ほどおっしゃったようなことはそれに対反して、例えば禅のマスターの人が非常に線だけを書くんじゃなく、その周りのものを書くとか間を強調するっていうようなことを、全ての動きを尊重するっていうようなやり方ですね。それが文化的なカウンターポイントじゃないかしらっていうことですが、
禅のマスターは考えるなってことを教えているんじゃないかと思うんですね。で考えないっていうことをするっていうのはなかなか難しいことですよね。考えるなって言って。でも私はつい考えるわけです。
The Zen master suggests or teaches to not think. And that's a very difficult thing for me to do. I keep thinking about things, so it's very hard for me to follow his teaching and not think at all.
もしカリグラフィーだったら体で考えるというか、言語にする前の段階で体の中にあるものを表現するんだと思うんですね。そこで直接的な表現ができると思うんです。身体の中に眠ってたものが線の中で蘇るってことがあるんですね。考えるとまたいろんな言葉ができて、それがその直接的な生命力、線の生命力が消えてしまうかもしれない。考えることでなくなるかもしれないと思うんですね。だからそういう非常に難しいところにあると思います。
So, for example, in calligraphy, it's one's whole body that expresses the lines and the writing. So, what was sleeping within ourselves is expressed directly onto the calligraphic motion and page. And if we think about it, then the life of the lines doesn't really come alive.
I think composing is an embodied practice, and rather than not thinking, I might say it's a different kind of thinking, and it takes a lot of practice. And also to trust yourself, I guess, and maybe that calligraphic exercise of yourself is also a practice in learning to trust the world. True.
僕の若い作曲の学生には自分が書いたことについてよく考えるように教えています。
When I teach, I tell my students that they need to think a lot in order to compose.
You need the grid first before you can, right? until you get to be a master. But as I was also listening to you talk about Ma, and also listening to your piece again, I was also thinking about how there are different silences, and how even other composers who are known for silence, like John Cage and Takemitsu, their silences feel different than yours. And in some ways, your use of Ma feels at once maybe more organically connected to the aspects of traditional Japanese music, but also somehow more 20th century European music too. What do you think?
難しい質問です。
That's a very difficult question to deal with.
私がまた空というふうに言います。空っていうのは空って書いてね。空っぽ、エンプティですね。でもそれは充満されたもの、フルネスでもあるんですね。そういう状態をいつも考えています。つまり例えばですね、雅楽の中は笙という楽器があります。で、笙というのはマウスオルガンですね。で、それで息を吐いても吸ってもずっと音が持続できるんです。で、雅楽ではいつも笙が背景にずっと鳴ってます。そうするとそれは沈黙になるんです。音が充満されてもう聞こえない状態になって、その雅譜というかそのバックグラウンドの上に龍笛と七力とフルートとオーボエに似た楽器が強いカリグラフィーの線を描きます。こういうそういう風になっていますと、この強いカリグラフィーの線はこの聞こえない空白の中から生まれてくるように感じることができます。
So I think of ma, a space, but also I think of the word ku, which means emptiness. Emptiness. It's the same character as for sky, but it means emptiness. So I think with those concepts, the space becomes very full. In gagaku, the ancient imperial court music, there's the instrument called the sho, which is a mouth organ, and you can play it either exhaling or inhaling. So there's always the background sound of the sho in gagaku. And since it's always in the background, it almost becomes silent. And then the ryuteki, which is a flute, and other instruments form the strong sort of calligraphic line in front of the silence of the sho that's being played. So I think it's that kind of, even if the sound is there, it has become silent because it is constantly there.
But I was also thinking about, say, for example, the context of silence in like John Cage's music or Takemitsu's music. And one of the biggest contrasts of their forms, their music is the form of their pieces with yours. For example, in Takemitsu's music, the form is almost like different scenes of a garden. And you look at this and you go back to that, and it's famously non-developmental. And Cage has different pieces and different strategies of creating form in different ways, and the form frames the silence in different ways. And often in your music, and you told me that it also maybe comes from loving Beethoven and the classical music, the form in your music is often arch, form. So for me, the ma aspects that I locate from Japanese music is framed by a more developmental form than we hear in takemitsu or cage.
それは僕が仕事をしている場所が中央ヨーロッパで、そういったそういうヨーロッパの悪い影響を自分が受けているからと思います。
That may be because I work in Central Europe and I've taken on some of the bad influences of the music from that area.
This is the biggest lesson from tonight. As I was listening to you talk, as I've also heard you talk about the calligraphic stroke and the importance of the upstroke that precedes the stroke that leaves the mark, I also wondered if that was perhaps allegorical to a larger context of a life in art, right? The moments where the brush meets the page is like events like this, or a concert, or the moment you're actually writing. But there's these invisible moments, right, in your life that contextualizes, also informs those moments of concertizing, music making. Can you speak to us about the important invisible moments in the upstroke of your life?
私は作曲家として雲水っていう言葉が好きなんですね。雲水ってよくあります。雲と水。それは日本語で雲水っていうとお坊さんのことなんです。何も持たないで雲のように水のように流れていくっていうね。で作曲家としてもそういうふうに生きていきたいと思っています。つまりその雲や水っていうのは宇宙の流れに沿って生きていくんです。自分が何かやりたいんじゃなくて、そういう大きな宇宙の流れを感じながら、その流れに沿って生きていく。そして僕はそういう宇宙の流れを自分の音楽で表現したいと思っています。だからよく言うんですけども、西洋音楽が理の音楽、理性の理の音楽だと、自分は気の音楽です。気というのは元気の気ですね。その気の流れに沿って生きていく、そういうふうな生活を作曲家としてしたいと思っています。
So I consider myself as a composer that I'm trying to live as if I am just cloud and water. There's a phrase in Japanese called unsui, which refers actually to priests. And they are like cloud and water. They are not substantial, but they are living within space and the flow of space. So I try to live or compose according to that, and to express myself within the flow of space, eternity. And of course, you need skill and technique. 義と気ですね。
理性の理。
Oh, I'm sorry, not technique, but logic, as well as spirit, to be able to live in this flow of space that we have around us, and to compose, and for me to compose.
Listening to you talk about Western music as building a cathedral of immortality, and when you talk about the beauty of ephemerality, of the cherry blossoms, and also silence is a heroic confrontation, right? Confronting silence. I'm thinking about this theory that I've been developing for some time, that Beethoven, the Beethovens of the world, teaches you a fear of death, because there is a focus on fixity, these temples of immortality, whereas music that's more that embraces change and embraces how things every moment in our lives are actually different, have actually helped me approach life with more courage. And I wondered if you had a kind of response to those extensions of things that I was extrapolating from what you were saying.
今日はケンさんが僕の音楽をすごく日本のものと、そして西洋のものと別のものとして捉えていらっしゃるような気がしますけども、僕としてはむしろその共通のものを探しているんですね。そういう別の道から、例えば僕はベートーベンも好きですし、西洋音楽もすごく好きなんですね。でそれはなぜ好きかと、やっぱりそういう素晴らしいものがあるからで、そういうものとそうではないその日本の余白みたいなものともが全く違うものを探求するのではなくて、どこか共通のものがあって、その共通のものの中から新しい音楽を生み出していきたいと思っています。だから何もかも日本と西洋というふうに分けるのではなくて、なんかそこにつながれるもの、そういったものを音楽で表現していきたいとも思っています。
The way you've expressed Japanese music and Western music today sounds like they're actually different from each other. But what I'm trying to do is find the commonality in Japanese and Western music. I love Western music. I think it's splendid. And of course, I love Japanese music and aspects of Japanese music as well. But I don't think they are things to be separated. I think we're looking for the similarity. I'm looking for the similarity in between them and the commonality among them.
I have one other final question. I first met you 20 years ago at a festival in southern France, and on that occasion you had brought a gagaku ensemble to play contemporary music. And in that festival, there were other famous composers whose music is quite virtuosic, like Brian Ferneyhough, and Messiaen's music was performed. And what stood out to me was that your ensembles and the gagaku ensemble felt like it could be music from 1,000 years ago as well as 1,000 years into the future. And I still feel like it somehow floats outside of time, thinking back on it 20 years ago. Whereas the older I get, when I think about the other music I heard on that festival, it's still located in that time, perhaps even a little bit earlier. I think of it as late 20th century music. You know? So that's another kind of I don't know if it's an aesthetic question or some sort of music value of time and timelessness. Do you have thoughts about that?
最近はですね、あなたの作曲はどのくらい時間がかかりましたかっていうと、昔はですね、室内楽だと3ヶ月で、オーケストラだと半年、オペラだと1年とか、 言ってたんですけども、今は全部の作品が1000年かかったっていうふうに言うようになりました。というのは、自分のが今習って勉強して習って表現する世界だけでは足りなくて、もっと自分の無意識の中にある世界、体の中に眠っている世界から音楽を生み出していきたいと思うんですね。そうするとたった一曲の短い曲を書くにでもやっぱり1000年のは必要なんじゃないかなというふうに思うんです。で、そういったことを考えながら作曲しています。
So recently, I've been thinking when people ask how long it takes me to compose some music. If it's a short piece, it might be 3 months, and then a longer piece, 6 months. If a full orchestra work, maybe 1 year. But I'm now starting to think that any kind of composition has taken 1,000 years to compose. There's been 1,000 years of background, which I have studied now and I'm composing now, but it has that 1,000 years behind it. So within my unconscious or subconscious, there's that 1,000 years of composing that has gone on. And that's what I'm thinking of these days when I compose.
やっぱり近代の音楽はやっぱり個人が作曲する。その個人というのはすごく大切だと思うんですけども、そこでやっぱりエゴといいますか、自我が作曲するということがあるので、そういったものが消えるにはやっぱりもっと深い根拠、もっと深い源泉を見つけていかなきゃいけないと思うんですね。そうするとやはり1000年くらいかかったっていう作曲した方がよりそういった自我が消えていくんじゃないかと思うんですね。
So for modern music, we think of individuals as composing the music. So it's very ego-centric music. But I think when you think deeper about it, then the ego should disappear. And so with the compositions that have gone on for 1,000 years, that perhaps maybe not one person has composed, but many people, many cultures have composed. And I think that gives it a much deeper meaning for me.
Thank you very much. And now we'd like to turn to Q&A with the general audience, but I understand Professor Halp has a question first. Yes?
Well, Ken asked me to ask the first question so that people
You don't
can
have to tell him that, no.
have the time. So let me ask the first question, and I'll do that in Japanese first and then in English. 今のお話を聞いていて、その西洋と日本と分けないで考えるというようなこと、いただいたご本の中でもその端々は見えていたと思うんですが、その考え方の延長線といいますか、環境のことを随分書いて、音楽の中でランドスケープスについて作っていらっしゃる作品、それから今度の次の作品については環境破壊が一つのテーマになっているというふうに伺いましたけれども、環境についてお考えになるとき、西洋的なものの考え方、日本的な感じ方といったようなもの違いがあるというふうに考えて日本的なものを強調なさってるんでしょうか。それとも環境に対するご自身の感じ方というものがそのまま音楽になるような感じなんでしょうか。Okay, I asked kind of a complex question, probably too complex. But my question is about his perception of the environment when he has a series of pieces about landscapes, and also I've heard that his new work is about environmental destruction. So my question is, when he thinks about the environment, is he emphasizing the Japanese way of perceiving the environment, or is it something that he feels his own feeling without really distinguishing Japanese versus Western?
僕の考えではやっぱり人間は自然の一部であると思うんですね。そして音楽を表現するということはその自然のパートの一部になるということでもあると思うんです。音で自然の一つのパートになるという考え方があります。まずそこまで。
I believe that humans are part of nature, and when we compose, then we're becoming a part of nature with sound.
僕の音楽のほとんど全てはその自然と一体化するというのが目的になっています。音で自分が音になって溶けて自然の流れと一つになるということがテーマなんですね。
So my effort is to become at one with nature, and so my sounds melt into nature and becomes at one with nature.
で例えば僕のオペラです。ケント・ナガさんと一緒に作ったシチレス・メイヤーですね。静かな海ですけども、海ではその人がですね私たちはそういう海から生まれてそしてまた海に帰っていくというようなイメージがあって、そしてそれは灯籠流しっていう行事がそのオペラの中に出てくるんですね。灯籠流しというのはその亡くなった方の霊を海に返すっていう意味があるわけです。ところがその海は福島の事故で放射能で汚染されてるんですね。そうすると我々が魂が帰っていく場所がなくなるんですね。それは本当に私たちにとって本当に大きな事件で、そういったことに対してやはり何か抗議のメッセージとかいうものをすることはやっぱり作曲家としても大切なんじゃないかなと思います。
So in the opera Silent Sea, the concept is that we are born from the sea and we return to the sea. And in Japan, there's a ritual that lit lanterns are floated onto the sea so that the spirits of the dead can return to the sea. But with the Fukushima nuclear plant explosion, the sea has been polluted by radiation. So there's nowhere that people, the dead spirits, can return to. So it's that kind of dilemma that I'm searching for as a composer.
All right, shall we open it up for the audience? Anybody have?
日本の楽器は一つ一つの音が持っている命が大切なんですね。それを西洋の形に押し込めてしまうと、その一つ一つの音が生きたものになりません。で、よく聞こえません。そうではなくて、日本の楽器には日本の音に合うフォームというか形を作らなきゃいけません。西洋の楽器ですと、もっと音は一つのグループになって一つの意味を作ります。それがモチーフであったり、一つのメロディーであったり、ハーモニーであったりするんですけども、そういうものと一つ一つの楽器が持っているその音の響きの美しさ、それから切なさみたいなものを大切にする作曲とはかなり作曲の態度が変わってくるわけです。
In Japanese music, each note is very important. Each sound is very important. So when that is compressed or pushed into the Western form, that each sound doesn't have the importance, can't show its importance as it does in Japanese music. Western music is more of a group effort. There's a motif or a melody or harmony. So that kind of flow is important in Western music, whereas and of course in Western music, the beauty and the sound of each instrument is featured, but it's still within the flow of the general whole, whereas in Japanese music, each sound is very important on its own.
ところが日本では例えば琴をオーケストラにして琴を何十台も並べてそこでビバルディの四季を演奏したりします。
But in Japan, they do have concerts where they have several dozen koto on the stage, and they all play Vivaldi's Four Seasons on the stage with the koto.
雅楽でラベルのボレロを演奏もします。
And with the gagaku instruments, they do Ravel's Bolero too.
Next question. Yes.
失礼します。
音楽を作曲できることが可能ですかということです。自然が音楽を作曲するっていうことができるんです。自然の中に音楽はあるんですか。
音楽をどう捉えるかによりますけども、自然の響きそのものは音楽と言えるかどうか分かりませんけども、音楽のゼロ地点、その原子の状態で最ももしかしたら最も美しいものかもしれません。それは人間の手が触ってない最も純粋な響きのある状態かもしれません。
So there are musical sounds in nature, and it may be that those kinds of sounds or the types of music we catch from nature are the actual primordial origins of music, and they're the pure sounds that music is actually made of.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
お琴の彼女が最も好んで弾く17世紀の作曲家はブラインドだったんですね。目が見えない人だったんですね。ということは楽譜をかけませんから自分で音だけで聴いてで自分で演奏したわけです。でそれを口述で弟子に伝えて今日まで来たんです。つまり紙に書いたスコアっていうのはないわけですね。
The most famous koto composer in the 17th century, who sort of was the basis of the current way people play koto, was blind. So he couldn't write down the notes to play koto. So all of his compositions and his technique were passed down through oral tradition.
でそういった口伝の言葉口で伝える音楽というのはものすごく大きな意味があってそれがですね今私たちは自分が演奏できないものですから紙に書いて人に伝えるんですね。そうすることでですねたくさん失ったものがあると思います。
So that oral transmission method has a great many advantages because it goes from one person to the next. But nowadays, I can't perform the koto. So I write it down as notes so that somebody else can perform it. But we've lost a lot of things in the fact that we write down our notations now.
ただ楽譜を書くことでその先ほど言いましたけど考えてはならないことを考えるわけです私たちは。その考えることでもしかしたらその音楽をもうちょっと違う次元に持っていけるかもしれないわけです。そういう可能性もあると思うんです。
So when we write down the music, we think of things that we shouldn't be thinking of, really. But there are sort of possibilities that we could perhaps bring it up to a different level, a different dimension when it is played.
それが西洋音楽の最も素晴らしい結果だったと思うんです。考えること、そして構築することによって音楽は違う次元に持っていくということですね。それでしかし失ったものがあるということも忘れてはいけないと思います。
So I think that's one of the most marvelous things about Western music is that it is then able for performers to bring it to a different dimension, a different level when they actually read the score and perform the piece. But I think we shouldn't forget that much has been lost in that process as well.
で僕自身の経験を言いますと素晴らしい演奏家に演奏してもらいますと自分が考えたものよりもはるかに素晴らしいものが出てきます。で、ダメな演奏家にやりますとはるかにダメなものが出てきます。
So in my own experience, if a very skilled and wonderful performer performs my piece that I have written down, it becomes much better than what I think I wrote down. Whereas a person who is not a good a musician performs my piece, then it's much worse than what I think I wrote as the composition.
The text for this piece is also about missing a place, feeling displaced, and missing a lover. And then the space, so kind of text paints that distance and that sense of waiting and loneliness too. And there's also, this piece has a missing limb too. There's a version of this piece as a double concerto with a cello that Kyoko-san performed also the premiere with Yo-Yo Ma. And so we're also missing, if you will, a kind of limb there too, right? Shall we take maybe one or two more questions? Anybody else? Yes.
うん、アートの持ってる力っていうものを信じてる人と信じてない人がいると思います。で、例えばですね、日本にはたくさんの仏像があります。仏教の祈っている仏像がもうどのお寺にもありますし、道端にもありますよね。石で作られた。そういったものはほとんど誰が作ったか分かりません。だけどすでにそこにあるんですね。で、多くの人がそれを大切に守っています。で、そういった祈りの仏像は社会性もないし、何の役にも立たないかもしれません。で、世界は常に戦争を繰り返すし、だけども私たちはそういったものがあることを知ってて、そこでどこかで支えられている部分があるんじゃないかと思うんですね。で、僕はそういう仏像を作った人の一人になりたいと思う。無名でいいから。で、それは何にも役に立たないかもしれないけど、もしかしたらそこに存在するってことに 意味があるかもしれないと思うんです。
So I think there are people who believe in the power of art, and there are people who do not believe in the power of art. In Japan, there are many Buddhist statues all over the country, in temples and along the streets. And for most of them, we actually do not know who the sculptor was. And so even if there are so many Buddhist sculptures of Buddha, there's still internal strife and struggles that happened in Japan. So they may not have much social meaning, but the fact that someone made it and it's there within Japanese life does have meaning. So I think that sort of, to whether you believe in something like that, to have meaning or not, is up to the person.
Okay, I think we can conclude here. Thank you very much. Thank you for.